Hi, everybody. Welcome back to CELPIP Live Season 6. How is everybody doing? I see that somebody has already written a comment. I'm so happy to join the live. We are happy to have you. So let me know in the comments below if you haven't, or if you're here and you haven't commented yet. I am personally doing great. Here is your trivia question for the day. Whose birthday do Canadians celebrate with a May holiday? Whose birthday do Canadians celebrate with a May holiday? Let me know in the comments below. Please don't Google, as I always request you to. And whoever has the right answer first I will share the response towards the end of our segment. For now, let's start our show. If you're new here, CELPIP Live is an interactive series made to help CELPIP test takers like you understand a little bit more about the CELPIP test. So if you are preparing for your first test or trying to write a second one, I would encourage you to subscribe to our channel and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as we go live. In today's episode, we're exploring strategies that can help you improve your comprehension. This is an important episode because we will be focusing on connecting ideas within passages. And unless you are able to do that successfully, you haven't really understood the full reading material. So I hope you are ready to focus with Brandi today. Let's go and welcome her onto the show. Hi, Brandi. Welcome to our show. How are you doing today?
I'm well, as always. How are you, Vishwati?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining us. We have 42 guests here already, so I will let you get started.
Excellent. And I always enjoy seeing all the welcoming hellos and how are yous in that chat box before we get started. So thank you for bringing that positivity to us. I'm going to go ahead and share my presentation and we'll get started then. So right, as Ashwati has said, we are going to be focusing on reading comprehension mainly today. But in order to fully understand what it is we're reading about, we must be able to identify the connections in meaning or the relationships between ideas in a text. So to start off our episode, what we're going to look at is how ideas relate to each other. This is a slight recap or review of what we did last week, if you were, or 2 weeks ago, I guess, in our last episode. If you weren't there, no worries. We're going to dive right in now and look at how these conjunctions, these joining words, are going to be used to bridge or connect ideas together. You notice my icon of the bridge up top to remind us to put these words right in the middle of two simple ideas to connect them. Now, when we are creating our own sentences in writing or speaking, we must be able to choose the correct meaning or the correct word in order to make sense of the writing. So I've got some examples here of sentences using these simple conjunctions. We're starting at a beginner level right now. So this would be probably about CLB 5 or 6 level is where we start to see a lot of consistent mastery of forming more compound sentences like this. So the trick, what we're doing today is I'll go through a few examples with you. I'm going to have you also generate some of your own ideas to fully demonstrate understanding of the meanings of all of these sentences as they relate. And the idea is that if we can produce our own language, when we then turn our attention to reading, which we will do next, you should be able to identify these joining words in the text and then understand how the ideas connect. So it's sort of a step-by-step process today. So my first example on screen, I'm using the conjunction but always makes a contrast. So the two ideas on either side of that conjunction are going to be opposite in idea or expectation. So very simply, my example says, I broke my wrist, but I can still drive. Below that, we have probably the most common word in English, I'm going to suggest, the word and we can use and to connect just about any idea together. But we should only be using it when the two ideas that we're joining are belonging to the same general idea. So here, Carrie exercises daily and she feels strong. Our third example down uses the conjunction or, where we're giving a choice. So you can have a snack now or eat dinner later. And last but not least, we've got a cause and effect situation with so. Manny goes to bed late, so he's always tired. That last action is a direct result of the first. All right, so there's basic examples to remind us about the meaning of these simple conjunctions or joining words. Now it's your turn to make some of your own sentences. So you can use these, of course, in your speaking and writing, but we're going to focus on really understanding the connection to apply it to reading in just a moment. So I've got a sentence starter on screen, and I want you to type into the live feed right now with a suggestion on how you might continue this idea. So Sandra had a headache last night, but the word but is a contrast. So whatever idea you generate or produce right now has to be something opposite to the first. So if Sandra had the headache last night, what is different right now? Perhaps in the morning, the next morning, that sort of thing. So I'll open it up to some ideas and suggestions from you. I can't see the live chat as I'm presenting, so I will rely on Ashwati to read out any ideas coming in. Please take advantage of this little bit of practice we're doing to really fine-tune your writing skills. Grammar is important here, as we'll see when we get to the reading section. So I'm hoping you can type in a correct, simple sentence from beginning to end, but that matches in meaning with what we have here. I'll give you some time to think. And don't overthink it. Maybe like 4 or 5 words would do it. But we do have to know how to continue these ideas ourselves, I think, in order to understand how they're going to be used later on in the reading. Any ideas?
Hey.
And if not, go ahead.
Hello. We have some ideas here. Hang on. She came to work today. She is still able to work today. She was able to go to work this morning. She is doing well now. She bared the pain, but she still studied all night.
Good.
Work
Good.
today. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. So it looks like everybody's focused on work, which is fine. That's definitely one idea you could have. But again, I'm glad to see that I think all the examples you shared with us just now, Ashwati, do continue with the word she, because we're talking about Sandra. So it makes sense to make the sentence about her in this case. She felt fine this morning is my idea, very similar to yours. I'm going to point out right now something that came up in our last episode on CELPIP Live. We had some questions about verb tense usage. Should the verb tenses be the same, or can they be different on opposite sides of these conjunctions? Most often, you would be using the same verb tense when it makes sense to do so, like this. So she had a headache, but she felt fine this morning. So I'm consistent there with my past tense. If you don't want to focus on Sandra, though, you don't have to. I'm focusing here on the headache itself. So she had a headache last night, but it went away after she took some Tylenol, and so on. So we understand how to make a contrast. Again, this is fairly simple or beginner level, but we do also want to master control over our sentence structure, because that's going to help you in your writing and your speaking. All right, and is basic. So this one, I'm just going to go ahead and show you some ideas to save some time. So my nephew won the tennis match, and we want to continue just with a similar idea. And he celebrated with his coach, and he took home a trophy. So again, I'm sticking to the past tense verb usage on both sides of that simple conjunction. Let's try this one as a group maybe. This is a choice. So Tracy can drive my truck, or what would be a logical alternative there? What might you suggest Tracy can do instead? So please pay attention to your verb tense. Please select a verb or an action that's interesting. But most importantly, make the idea make sense as far as the situation calls for.
Hello. Tracy can drive my truck, or... Oh, never mind. They're still... Oh, here, okay. They're still answering the one before. I got one.
I see.
Take a bus. Tracy can drive my truck or take a bus. Tracy can drive my truck, or she can rent a U-Haul.
Ooh, nice.
Tracy can drive my truck or rent a better car, or can walk to the venue, or she can use the transit. Yeah.
Okay, good. So there's a couple of variations there in your suggestions. So I'm just going to be a little bit picky here with the grammar part of this. If we're going to create a true compound sentence, and a compound sentence are two simple sentences that are on either side of the joining word, in this case, or. The two sentences on both sides, they should be complete to themselves. And what I mean by that is if I just said, Tracy can drive my truck, I could just stop talking and put a period there and be finished. Or I could just start here. She can catch the bus. This is a complete sentence. And we know we have a complete sentence when we have the subject, which is the person, and then the predicate, which is basically the action and completed idea. So if you're going to use these conjunctions to join words together, you should be starting with the subject on the other side. It is possible to be very brief and simple by saying, Tracy can drive my truck or walk. You could do that, but you're not creating a true compound sentence. And I only mentioned this for variety's sake. Sometimes you just want to be brief and simple, and that makes sense to do so. But part of your score for speaking and writing is going to be showing a good variety of structures with a bit more added complexity. So I think learning the actual compound sentence structure is quite helpful here. Anyway, you all had very logical ideas, regardless of how simple or complex you made it. Here's one of mine. Tracy can drive my truck, or she can catch the bus, or she can walk to work, and so on.
What about using, because I'm getting a couple of examples with this, and it came previously also, and I wanted to address it then. So Tracy can drive my truck, or she can walk to work, but we are seeing examples where Tracy can drive my truck, or Tracy can communicate via local transport. So instead of using a pronoun, they're just using the name again.
Again, from a grammar standpoint, it's correct. You do have your subject and verb on both sides. So you've got a complete sentence there. So the grammar's fine. But I think you're actually weakening your expression by repeating the same subject, the name Tracy. The reason we use pronouns like he or she is to refer to the same person we've just started talking about, but we're avoiding all of that repetition, which sometimes gets boring in a piece of writing or as we're speaking. So although again, grammatically, it would be fine, I would not encourage you to do that. I would go with a simple pronoun she to replace Tracy. It's obvious here that we are talking about Tracy. So having a variety in your word choice is another skill that will help you, not just on the CELPIP test, but in the real world. It'll maintain a little bit of attention from the audience that don't want to hear the same words repeated over and over. Yeah, fair question though, for sure. All right, that's one. Let's do a couple examples here, because the word so is often easily mixed up. Sometimes people put the wrong cause and effect situation going on. So we use so to connect two ideas that do demonstrate that cause and effect. So I've started us off by saying, I'm exhausted. So what you're always going to put after this word so is the result. In other words, what's going to happen to you, or what will you do because you're so exhausted? So what ideas come to your mind? Just think of this logically. It doesn't have to be complex, but what makes sense? I'm exhausted. So you might have some flexibility with your verb tense here. Don't feel tied to using present tense because it might not make sense to do so.
Okay, so we're getting, I'm exhausted, so I took a nap.
Okay.
I took rest. I'm exhausted, so I need some rest.
Okay.
I'm exhausted, so I'm going to resign.
Yeah, I hear you on that sometimes.
Okay, I'm exhausted, so that's interesting. I'm interested about the tense here. I'm exhausted, so I had to sleep early without having dinner.
Okay.
I'm exhausted, so I have to leave the office early. I'm exhausted, so I'll take a nap. I'm going to rest. I removed some time for meditation to ease in myself. Yes.
Sure. Okay, good. So I'm going to say, do not use the past tense for this. It doesn't make sense. If you're exhausted now, it doesn't make sense to then talk about something that already happened in the past. So the only verb tense here that I would say would be incorrect is the past tense. So don't say I'm exhausted, so I took a nap. That doesn't quite match up with the time frame. I would, in this case, as I've done here, is use the future tense. It makes the most sense. And again, this goes back to our question we had last episode. Can we change the verb tense on either side of that joining word? And sometimes, yes, you can. So think about when we say I am exhausted, we mean in present moment. But sometimes that simple present verb tense, I am, focuses on sort of a period of time or a regular situation. I might be exhausted in this split second, but I probably will still be exhausted an hour from now. if I'm describing my state as being exhausted. So I'm looking ahead to see what I will do next. So I'm exhausted now, so I will take a nap. That hasn't yet happened, but I'm looking forward to taking that nap. So using the future tense here makes a lot of sense. You know, I'm exhausted, so I'll go to bed early tonight. Makes a lot of sense too. You're looking ahead. I think we had some present tense ones. I'm exhausted, so I can't remember honestly what you said. There was a present tense one there that made a little bit of sense. Do you remember what it was?
It says, I'm going to rest.
Okay, that's future. Yeah.
Hang on.
So I am going to, even though you're saying I am, it's kind of a trick. I am going to refers again to the future. So again, just be mindful of your time frame is all I'm saying. But
I need some rest.
I'm exhausted, so I need some rest. There you go. That one works. Yeah. Because needing rest is implying right now and continue. Yeah. So that one would make sense. So again, it's sort of a judgment call from your end. You always have to ask yourself, does this make sense logically from a time frame? You know, could it stand the time test? Past tense doesn't. Future tense is definitely the most common for this situation. But if you're crafty and can play with your words like that last example, I need some rest, that would work just fine. Anyway, the reason why we're looking at the connections between ideas within sentences is because when we are reading, and we're now turning our attention to a reading passage, I think understanding the basic ideas and then identifying those conjunctions, it should allow us to anticipate or know what to expect, what type of information is going to follow. And when the brain is prepared that way, when it knows what's about to happen or it thinks it knows, you're going to understand the material so much more easily. And then later on a language test like the CELPIP, looking at these connecting words is going to help you, I think, pull out the details that you need to answer the questions more carefully, which I'll show you in a moment. Now, this practice activity we're looking at, it's not a real CELPIP test question. I'll mention that right now. This is something I sometimes ask ChatGPT to give us some writing, and I did that today. I'm going to be honest, I'm never entirely happy with ChatGPT's writing. I don't find the wording is ever quite natural and so on. So ChatGPT gave the foundation of this piece, and I revised it to make it a little bit more natural sounding. So I'll credit ChatGPT and my revisions together for the practice that we're doing as a group here. So we start off with communication is essential in every field of study. And so clearly this passage seems to be about communication. And it's no surprise that our general topic is introduced in the beginning. That would be classic of any reading passage. So we're reading, it's important to study. And when I see that word and, it's basic, yes. It's simple, yes. But we understand that the idea to follow should be basically another example of how communication is so important. If it's important in studying, what else might it be important in? That's what we're anticipating. And sure enough, and mastering it can open many professional doors, right? So we can use it for work as well. And we continue. Technology has changed the way we interact, and we know but is a contrasting word. So if technology has changed, we can expect that the next detail will be something opposite. So something about how technology has stayed the same would be my guess as to what's coming next. And sure enough, it says, but the core principles of effective communication remain the same. You must master clarity and tone, or, all right, we have an alternative here. We have a choice. That's what or means. So we're talking about communication. If we understand that we have to be clear and with our expression and tone, I'm anticipating that the choice here is going to be phrased almost like an alternative or a consequence. So in other words, we have to have clarity and tone as we communicate. What's going to happen if we don't have these things would be the way we could anticipate. And you'll lack the foundational skills that are important in emails and face-to-face conversations if you don't have that clarity and tone. You can improve your communication skills. So this is a cause and effect situation. So I'm looking for the result. If we can improve communication, what will we do then as a result? Oh, well, then we will practice them regularly. Okay, so again, always anticipating what's coming next. Takes less time overall to dive into this passage and understand the main points. So we're going to take this passage using the basic conjunctions, and we're going to answer a multiple choice type question. Ashwadi, did you want to say something before I continue? I hear background noise. No,
it's just me here. participating.
Okay. Yeah. And again, I have to say to viewers, the only thing I can see is my presentation. So when I hear other things, I assume maybe someone has a question. So I'll just keep going then. Okay, so our first multiple choice question that we're going to answer is a very classic one that you'll probably see on a CELPIP test in the future. There are 3 types of questions on CELPIP. We have general meaning, we have specific detail, and we have inference related questions. This one, what is the main idea, is a classic general meaning type question. And what it asks us to do then is take the passage we've been reading. Now we're just looking at one paragraph for time's sake today, but we have to figure out what all the ideas presented in this passage, how they all fit together and relate under one broad category. So I'm going to go ahead and read the possible answer choices below. And when you think you know the answer to the question, please identify it in our live chat here with one of those 4 letters. All right, so what is the main idea of this paragraph that we've just gone through together? Is it A, technology has made communication easier? B, communication skills should be practiced daily? C, communication is an important life skill? Or D, writing is more important than speaking? Only one answer is ever correct on the CELPIP test. So look for the idea that encompasses all of the ideas in a broad or general sense. You're not looking for specific details, and this is really important for accuracy.
Hello. So we have an overwhelming, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people have responded with C.
Which one? Sorry?
C.
Okay.
With option C.
Yeah. Okay.
And then we're getting more C's. We got 1 B. Another B now. Okay. Yeah.
So a little bit divided between B and C. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to reveal what the right answer is, and it is indeed answer choice C. So communication is an important life skill. And let's quickly review that we all understand and accept this to be the accurate answer. So yes, this whole passage is about communication. No surprise there. But the answer choice focuses on how communication is important. And we begin this paragraph up top by saying the same thing. Communication is essential. And that word essential means the same as important. It's sort of like a synonym, a paraphrased idea. On your CELPIP test, quite often you will have paraphrased ideas. So coming into this test with a highly developed vocab is going to help you match the meaning there. So this is where I would look in the paragraph to figure out. Now, answer choice C focuses, though, that communication is important basically in life. And when you look all the way through this paragraph, every single part of it gives you an example of how you would use communication in life to be successful, whether it's to study, whether it's at work, whether it's just to communicate. It's a foundational skill we read. And we're told at the end to practice these skills regularly, which strongly implies that, of course, it's got to be important if we're being told to do it every day. So with all that evidence, choice C is definitely the best, most correct answer here. It makes sense. Everything relates back to it. All right, so we can without a doubt select C. Now, if this was a real test, those of you that are confident with that selection would hit or click C. You would just move on to the next question. As the CELPIP test moves forward, by the time you get to the end, say parts 3 and 4, these are the most advanced levels. And the questions are going to be more advanced as well. So you might not always be able to identify the right answer immediately. So in that case, I'd like to present another technique that is very helpful. It allows you to go through all the other answers and eliminate them as wrong. If you could even prove 2 of these to be wrong, if you're still not sure, you would have a 50-50 chance left of guessing the right way. And on the CELPIP test, if you don't know the answer, we want you to guess. We don't want you to leave it blank because you don't lose marks for any wrong answers. But if you guess right, you get a point. Anyway, let's just demonstrate this technique. I'll show you what I mean by walking through the other answers to eliminate the wrong ones. So we'll start at the top with answer choice A. So this one says, technology has made communication easier. The word technology is the focus here, and it was also talked about in the passage up top. But answer choice A focuses on how technology has made communication easier. The passage talks about how technology has changed the way we interact. Now, nobody here suggested choice A, but I'm wondering, it's possible some of us might have wondered, oh, technology's changed our interactions. And in your own mind, you might just assume that these changes are improvements. So you might be believing answer choice A to be correct. Remember, again, with our conjunctions, we always have to look at the big picture. And because we're using this contrast, we understand that, sure, there have been some changes to communication, but other parts of it have remained the same. So arguably, there's not a lot of evidence there to suggest that whatever is happening with technology has become easier. So that doesn't make sense. And further to that, technology is only mentioned in this one little part of the passage. The rest of the ideas don't discuss technology at all. And we're trying to find a main idea. So for a main idea to be true, we have to have relationships between all the other ideas pointing back to it. So that's why we can discount answer choice A. Some of you thought maybe choice B could be correct. So let's talk about why it's not. It's definitely not correct. So sure, it's about communication skills. I mean, that's common because this whole passage is about communication. But choice B focuses on the idea that we should be practicing daily. And you might have seen this in the very end of our passage up top, that we should be practicing our skills regularly. So those ideas actually do match. So idea B is correct. According to this passage, we should be practicing daily. But once again, this is one specific detail. The rest of the ideas throughout do not talk about practicing regularly. So this is a specific detail, but it's not the main idea. And this is a classic type of mistake. Try to avoid it on your test. When you're trying to find a general idea, you must identify relationships. Everything leads back to that main topic, which happens to be C. All right. The other one, nobody chose D, but writing is more important than speaking. I'd like to do a quick vocab check with you if I can. This will help you on your own test. Nothing in this paragraph uses the words writing or speaking, but there are other words that are related to those two concepts. Can you help me find them, please?
Hello.
Writing, speaking. How do we know what part is talking about writing and speaking? So these are the sort of higher level skill sets, maybe, that you'll be forced to
know.
Hmm?
I said, I know.
Good. I'm glad you know.
Okay. Somebody said emails and face-to-face conversations.
Yahoo! That's exactly right. So again, this doesn't relate back to our conjunction usage, but again, it's a vital skill. So we have to recognize, well, writing and speaking, those words aren't there, but an email is when you write. Speaking is having a face-to-face conversation. So what this means then is you'd likely be looking in that part of the paragraph to see if this idea makes sense. Is writing more important than speaking? Nope. They're both foundational skills according to this. So that's another way that you can just discount answer choice D. It's not even true. It's not even accurate. So how could it be the main idea?
I have a point here that I want to bring up.
Yeah.
There are two different arguments. So, okay. So the answer is emails and face-to-face conversations, but people were also sharing clarity and tone as one of the as the possible answer. And of course, emails and face-to-face are the more obvious answers, but there is a confusion. Like there is some audiences say that clarity and tone indicate speaking, while the other audiences say clarity and tone indicate emails. So I just want you to clarify.
Interesting. See, I would never have even gone there because clarity and tone is a vital. It says you must master clarity and tone. If you don't have clarity or tone, you're not going to be able to write emails or have face-to-face conversations properly. So clarity and tone are two skills that are vital. They're necessary in all forms of communication. Yeah, so it doesn't apply just to writing or just to speaking. That's an excellent point to bring up. And I'm really glad you're bringing these things up. Others out there might be wondering the same thing. But do you see that conjunction or? It kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. Think of it as an alternative. Like if you don't have these two vital skills, which are clarity and tone, you're not going to be able to do any communication, whether it's email or face-to-face. So that's another way to look at how these skills are necessary for both of these items, right? Yeah, good one. Are there any other questions about that before I move on?
I think that's it.
Covers it. Okay, yeah, good points to bring up. Anyway, that was sort of more beginner level. The vocab in the passages were quite precise and high level, but as far as our structures went and our usages of the conjunctions themselves were fairly basic and simple. So we had compound sentences there. We're now going to step it up a notch and encroach on some intermediate, more advanced level type of connections. So I've got 4 words here. Perhaps you're using these in your own speaking and writing now, which is ideal. If not, let's quickly run through what each of these means. So however, in fact, because, and as a result. So for today's practice to focus us with the grammar structures, we're going to look at how to use these words in the middle of a sentence. So again, I've got my bridge icon up top to remind us we are bridging or connecting ideas. So you're going to notice that all of my examples are quite a bit longer than the first group we looked at with and, but, so, and or. And part of the reason for that is that since these particular joining words are higher level, they also command a little bit more formality. And it makes sense then to have vocabulary that's a bit more precise and ideas that are a little bit more extended. Again, that's the name of the game in the intermediate level, is that we're more fully developing ideas. So we'll start with the first one here. That word, however, is still a contrast. It means the same thing as but. So I hope this one's an easy one for all of us to remember how to use. It's just that when you say, however, you're creating a more formal approach. So here we've got the project deadline was extended. However, the team failed to complete the task. So again, opposite expectations and outcomes are a result there. The second example uses in fact, and this joining phrase, it actually can be used in many different ways. Today, we're going to look at it in a way that it emphasizes the information that comes before. So the runner's speed is improving. In fact, she can now run 10 kilometers in 52 minutes. So we're giving almost a piece of evidence, some proof to demonstrate exactly how we know that that runner's speed is improving. And that's often how we'll use in fact. It extends our ideas with precise details, which the rating team loves. The third example here uses because. Because does demonstrate a cause and effect situation, more or less how so does, but the word because is a little trickier because you can actually start a sentence with because, or you can put the word because in the middle, just like I've done here. So this is a special type of joining word. It's called a subordinating conjunction, and you actually have the choice to reorder your phrases. So for this example, as you can see, I've got the word in the middle. What I want you to remember, if you can, here's a bit of a trick that helps me. Maybe it will help you. The word because, I want you to look at the word cause right within, right? Because, cause. Cause is sort of like the reason for the action to happen. So this whole sentence reads, the teacher will dismiss class early today because her students are attending a rally. So again, the word because signifies the reason is there. It's the rally that's resulting in the teacher dismissing her students early. So if you can keep track of that in your mind, you'll always use this word because in the right order, right? Anyway, we'll do some examples with that in a minute and you'll get some practice. The fourth one here uses as a result. And I think this one's the most self-explanatory. Literally, we're giving resulting information based on the first action. So Sue has seen The Lion King 14 times. As a result, she knows most of the words by heart. Okay. The word, however, is a contrast. So just for time's sake, if you don't mind, we've already done some examples with the word but. So I'm just going to quickly show you a few more ideas here, just at a higher level. It says profits are expected to decline next month. However, so we want an opposite expectation. So however, all employees will remain employed, or however, they usually rebound by the end of the year, things like that. Okay, this is an easy one that I want you to do on your own. You can suggest some ideas in our live chat. It says, I'm an avid reader. And avid just means I like to read a lot. I'm very excited, enthusiastic about my reading. In fact, so what I'm hoping you can do right now, please, in our live chat is give sort of almost like a piece of proof or an example. How do we know that I am such an avid reader? What is it that I do perhaps that really proves how much I love to read? That's what you're looking to do here. So the idea you create still should be complete on its own. Think of writing almost a simple sentence, but it's going to connect back to the structure and continue on.
Hello. I am an avid reader. In fact, I read almost 20 pages per minute.
Wow, that's fast. Sure. I don't know if it's logical or reasonable, but it definitely proves the point how much you love to read.
Armin has, so this is also the same person who responded that I'm exhausted, so I must resign. So they've been giving very creative responses. Okay, I am an avid reader. In fact, I read 20 books every year. Wow, that's great. I don't think I can do 20 books. In fact, I enjoyed reading 10 books last month. Goodness. I am an avid reader. In fact, I read 3 books weekly. Um,
Perfect.
oh, I'm an avid reader. In fact, I'm presently reading a book with over 200 pages.
Perfect. All of these ideas make sense. Here we have some wiggle room, meaning the verb tenses are a little bit flexible. Some of you did what I did. So we can say, I am an avid reader. If I say that now, tomorrow, next week, or next year, it's still going to be true. So again, this simple present tense of I am is oftentimes used as sort of a regular condition. So we have to remember that. So to prove how much I love to read, I'm looking into things that I've already done. So look at my verb tense. I have read. I'm making this sort of a nod to the past up until now. I've read 32 novels this year. And a lot of you had your own variations on like 10 books this week or whatever it was. You could use, I guess, the future tense too. I'm an avid reader. In fact, I'm planning to read a 500-page novel starting tomorrow. There's lots of wiggle room here, but at least you're starting with the subject, which is I. That makes the most sense because you are the one that's reading. So regardless of your verb tense, you are starting with I, and that's what I like to see. I read every night before bedtime. Again, I'm just going simple present, but I'm using it as a regular habit. And this is true for me. I do read every night before bedtime. So that's partly why I wrote it, because it's true for me. Any other ideas there?
So I have a question. I know this is a reading exercise, and I mean, in general, today's presentation is about reading and how to improve comprehension. But I'm just curious, with if presented a situation where they have to write something like this, how much weightage do we have to give on the accuracy of your statement? So let's talk about this. I'm an avid reader. In fact, I read every night before bedtime. What's an avid reader? Does that make you an avid reader? Like, so, that's what is popping up in my head because we've had different variations of examples. I'm an avid reader. In fact, I read for 2 hours every night, or I'm an avid reader. In fact, I've read 20 books a year. So I don't know if reading 2 hours a night is as avid as reading 20 books a year. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I do understand, yeah. And the good news is with English and on your CELPIP test too, there's flexibility. What you're trying to do is create a supporting piece of evidence, which is exactly what we've done here. I read every night. You're choosing a piece of evidence that's precise, but it's also logical to the situation at hand. So whether you, like maybe you think, oh, you only read 2 hours a night, you're not an avid reader. Nobody's going to look at your test that way because somebody who does read 2 hours in a day, that's a lot of reading. And you could firmly stand behind the argument that clearly you read a lot, you like to read. Otherwise, why would you devote that kind of time? Now, if you said something like, I'm an avid reader, I've read 1 book in the last 5 years, I wouldn't say that that proves the point with very much weight. Most of us on a general level would say 1 book in 5 years. That's really not being an avid reader. So there's a little bit of thought that goes into the logic of your ideas. But I know all the ideas that were shared here today make absolute sense. Yeah, maybe a 200-page book you're reading right now, that shows you're really engrossed in it. So that would be just fine. Yeah. Okay. Good question from Ashwati. And it's a valid question to ask. And I want to remind you that the rating team is not nitpicking your content details to the point where they're going to fact check what it is you're writing about. It's better to have these precise details, like I read 200 pages, a book right now. It's better to have that than just to say, I like to read. Do you see the difference there in complexity? That's all we're doing, is adding an extra level of proof to make it interesting, but also to support our answer. Yeah, so fair question. Thanks for raising that, Ashwati. Good one. All right, let's practice this one because, again, it's a bit tricky with the position of the word because. So I phrased it precisely like this. Nora moved to Vancouver because. So because, again, that word cause is right there. What you're going to do is place the reason following the word because. So you're trying to figure out why Nora moved to Vancouver. So let's see what you have to say. It has to be a complete sentence on its own. You'll probably say something about Nora here to start, but I'm looking for why. Why did Nora move here? Nora moved to Vancouver because...
She wants to study at UBC.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
She got a new job here, she got a new job there. She got a new job. Oh, that's actually one of the top.
It's funny how that goes. We all have the same idea.
Nora moved to Vancouver because there are mountains there.
I had something like that too. This is why I moved to Vancouver. My sister was already here, so I wrote this because it's true for me. Obviously, my name's not Nora, but the idea is there. Nora moved to Vancouver because her sister lives there. And again, you notice the verb tense difference, right? We already moved, but the sister lives here now. So that would be perfectly fine. And someone said something about the parks and such, right? So
yes,
I have that too. This is a bonus. If you know anything about Vancouver, it's got lots of nature. So why not incorporate that? So Nora moved here to Vancouver because she loves its parks and hiking trails. Excellent. Always, again, with because, always put the reason following that word, and then the end result would be the other idea. And if you can remember that, you're going to always use the word because properly in the right order. Okay, last but not least, hopefully this is an easy one. Ben walks 5 kilometers every day. As a result, what can we say about Ben? He walks 5K every day. That would take about 50 minutes to an hour for the average person, I'd say. So what do you know about Ben based on the fact that he walks every day for 5K? As a result, he
has lost. Ben walks 5 kilometers every day. As a result, his cholesterol level is normal. He lost 5 kilograms. He is losing weight.
Nice.
His cardiac health is really good.
Excellent.
He is fit and very athletic.
Yeah, that's what I had more or less. He keeps fit and trim. I also had this one. He's explored many different neighborhoods and so on. I think as a result, it's one of the easiest ones to come up with. So again, when you're writing or speaking.
Sorry to interrupt you. There's a really interesting response here and I want to share that with you. Mm-hmm. Ben walks 5 kilometers every day as a result of going to the gym regularly.
No, that one would not make sense, right? Because he's walking and he's not walking because he's going to the gym. I don't see the obvious connection there. So as a result is supposed to basically give us a resulting action from the first one.
So here's how I interpreted it. Sorry to interrupt you. Ben walks 5 kilometers every day as a result of going to the gym regularly. And I'm wondering that you could please correct me if I misunderstood this incorrectly. But like, do they mean that the amount of walking they're doing in the gym is amounting to 5 kilometers?
So you're going to use a different structure. You're going to say, because Ben works out at the gym every day, he's now able to walk 5 kilometers in a day. That would be a much better way to say it. You're giving a direct cause and effect situation. Yeah, that's how I would do it. For sure. Yeah. As a result is kind of giving the direct result of the activity at hand, right?
Oh, also there's a comma. I think that's the point here. Ben walks 5 kilometers every day as a result, comma. And your sentence only works if there isn't a comma.
Your sentence structure earlier by using as a result isn't using this word appropriately either. So we use as a result. It's called a conjunctive adverb. And what it's meant to do is it gives the next idea is modifying the action of the first. So you must use this in a way, if you're looking to create this complex sentence, you must have 2 complete sentences on their own on either side of it. And the example that you gave does not do that. So it's not, I would know exactly what you mean if you said that to me, but it's not quite demonstrating correct grammar, nor is it demonstrating the complexity that we like to see to get up into the intermediate to advanced. Yeah, so it's just a matter of playing around with the correct conjunction or joining word and also the position of that word as well. Yeah, but you're on the right track. Just takes a little bit more fine tuning to get there. Okay, what we're going to do is continue on with the same passage all about communication that we've already started. So this is the second paragraph. The main difference is we're now going to use these higher level joining words, but still we should be able to anticipate what's coming next. So many people assume communication skills come naturally. However is a contrasting word, right? So if we've just read communication is natural, I'm guessing the next idea here is going to say it's not natural at all. So sure enough, communication skills often require deliberate practice and feedback. So that's, I think, an obvious connection to anticipate. Here's that word because again, and I purposely started a sentence with this word so we can keep track of it. Because poor communication can lead to misunderstandings or conflict. So again, because, we always know the reason is following the word because. So we now want to anticipate what's the result. So if communication causes conflict, what would be the resulting action? I'm guessing that's what this will be. Yeah, sure enough, it's vital to improve these skills over time. In fact, so now we're going to emphasize, I guess, how important it is to have proper communication skills. And here's sort of an example. In fact, professionals who communicate well are more likely to earn trust and lead teams successfully. As a result, so we're going to have one final resulting action from the first. So we've just talked about how important it is to have communication in the workforce. I anticipate we'll read something similar here, an extension of or an example. As a result, businesses often invest in workshops and training to build these skills across their workforce. So it all checks out. Again, recognizing the connecting word, understanding its meaning, anticipating the idea that comes next, makes you connect very deeply to the material and allows you to choose the answers on your multiple choice test a lot more accurately. So here's your second multiple choice question of the day. Completely different question, and I made it a harder question on purpose as we're now looking at intermediate to advanced level. So the question itself is, what best describes the role communication plays in the workplace? So remember the first one we did when we said, what's the topic or what's the main idea of the passage? That was general meaning. This one is not general meaning though. This is the most challenging type of question that there is that you could encounter on your CELPIP test. This is an inference question. And we know it's an inference question because of the language here. What best describes? The moment I read that, I know that those 4 answer choices, multiple choice style, they're not going to be stated anywhere directly in the passage. So I would be wasting my time if I was trying to find that direct idea. Instead, what we have to do is fully understand what we've been reading about. And it's not just communication, you'll notice. This question is focusing on the role of communication in the workplace. So there's a definite focus here. So looking at the 4 possible answers, we have to come up with the one that makes the most logical sense based on what we know from the passage above. So I'm just going to read the 4 choices out, and hopefully by the time I'm done reading them, you'll have entered in a guess into our live chat, telling us what you think is the correct answer. So what best describes the role communication plays in the workplace? Is it A, poor communication skills are common in office environments? B, communication skills are honed naturally over time? C, strong communication skills are most important for managers? Or D, communicating clearly often leads to career advancement? What do you think? It's a harder question. Take a guess if you're not sure. Maybe there are a few that you know are wrong and you can whittle it down. If you've got 2 answers left, you can take a guess. You've got a 50-50 chance of guessing right. What do you think?
Hello.
It will take more time to consider this one, for sure.
D.
Okay.
Yeah, they're all D.
Everyone's saying D. Okay.
Oh, there's one saying D.
Okay. Before I reveal the right answer, what I'm going to do is what you might do on your test actually with inference. I'm just going to start at the top of my list, and we're just going to go quickly down the list until we find the one that makes sense. Let's do it that way, just to change things up from the last practice we did. So choice A says poor communication skills are common in office environments. Well, sure, this idea talks about communication, but it focuses on poor communication skills. And there's only one part of this text that talks about poor communication. And you can see that I've underlined it for you up top. The idea states that poor communication happens often. It's common in office environments. But the passage says that poor communication leads to misunderstandings. You might argue that misunderstandings happen often, but again, looking at the text and the way it's structured, we're constructing this idea around poor communication using the word because. So we have a direct cause and result. We already know that it's because we have these miscommunications. That's why we absolutely need to improve them. So when you look back to choice A, we can't say that poor communication skills are common. The idea is not fully discussed or discussed at all. It's the wrong approach. So we can disqualify that one from our consideration. Moving on to choice B, communication skills are honed naturally over time. Well, yes, this is all about communication, sure. But the focus of choice B is that they're honed naturally. And if you remember, when we started reading this second paragraph, we saw almost word for word, communication skills come naturally. So this statement here in choice B, I can see on a test how somebody might actually click this as the right answer because the ideas seem to be so clearly matched to what we're reading up top. And if you're in a rush and you're tired, you might just click B and move on. But B is not correct. And we know it's not correct because of this. However, we know that a contrast is coming. So although some people assume communication comes naturally, we know from this passage that that is not the case. In fact, most of us have to practice on a regular basis. So choice B just doesn't make sense. It's not accurate at all. So therefore, it can't best describe communication in the workplace. So on to choice C, strong communication skills are most important for managers. Again, we talk about communication, but here we're attaching it to managers and not just managers using communication, but this idea asks us to consider if communication skills are most important for managers. That's the key. And sure, as this whole paragraph seems to be about communication, it makes sense we see that word all over the place. But what I would do here, just to double check this answer, is I would look for the word managers within the passage. I want to read a little bit more about what this paragraph is saying about how managers use communication skills, and then I'll know for sure if this answer is correct or not. And the trick is, it doesn't mention managers. This passage does not have the word managers, but it does use other language that connects to the idea of a manager. And I would like you to try to help me find them right now. This is excellent practice for, again, any type of question on your CELPIP test, as you won't always have an easy direct match. Sometimes there are synonyms and paraphrased ideas. So can you help me find a couple words here that suggest we're talking about managers, but we're using different words? What are those words?
Hello. Professionals.
Anything more? Not quite.
Lead teams.
Pardon me?
Lead teams.
That's right, yeah. So professionals means anybody working in a company. Somebody who leads teams, though, is what's going to attach more accurately to the notion of a manager. That's what a manager does. They lead, they direct. So because we can find that language right there in the paragraph, what I would do is just have a closer look, I guess, at what this idea is talking about. Professionals who communicate well are more likely to earn trust and lead teams successfully. Okay, so managers definitely do use communication skills, but are they most important for managers? And I would say no. When I look through the rest of this passage, it talks in the opening about how many people practice these skills every day. And we're told as well, it's so important to improve these skills. And when we get to the part about those professionals who lead teams, in other words, the managers, remember this idea follows that joining phrase, in fact. So this is sort of one example of a group of people who would use strong communication skills, but it doesn't prove that these communication skills are most important for them. And finally, I think the most important or the strongest piece of evidence that dismisses answer choice C is right here at the bottom. It's as a result, it's because we've seen evidence of strong communication skills being successful in the workforce. That's why all of these businesses are now offering training. They want to build these skills across the entire workforce. So we can now, without a doubt, say these skills are important for everyone working in the workplace. It's not specifically for managers. So that's why C is incorrect. And last but not least, I think a lot of you had chosen this one in the first place, and it is the right answer. It's the only one left, so we hope it's the right answer. It says communicating clearly often leads to career advancement. So yes, we're talking about communication, but the phrasing here is more accurate. Often leads to career advancement. So the logic here is to advance in your career, you're probably working already in a higher level position. So this would be someone who maybe already is a manager, a professional who leads teams. And again, when you look at that whole idea, people or professionals in a company who have these strong communication skills are the ones who are more likely to lead the teams or become managers. So that matches almost exactly with the idea here. If you have those clear communication skills, oftentimes you will advance in your career. And in this case, lead a team or become a manager. Okay, so again, nothing in here directly stated that D is true. We had to sort of use logic and reasoning to come up with that. Anyway, looks like you understood the concept well, so that's great. I am going to stop sharing my screen and come back to you just in case there are any other questions I can answer today. I know our reading has been a hot topic for quite some time with people wanting help. So let's just see if we have any other questions that we can answer today before we log off.
Sure. Yeah, feel free to ask your questions in the chat, and then I'm just like scrolling up to see if there were any questions in the beginning that weren't related to the episode but still need to be answered. Okay, so I don't see any questions. Somebody said, where is that question? They were asking why. Okay, they were asking why in the listening section we don't see the questions on screen, but we have to hear them. Wouldn't it be? I guess they want to know if. I guess they're asking why we don't show them for them to read it versus having them listen to it.
Okay, so I'll divulge into the listening component for just a moment, and I see a few other reading questions are coming in. So by the time I'm done with my answer, hopefully we'll have some more questions there. So the listening test has 6 parts. The first 3 parts, you're right about that. You hear the conversation, probably take some notes. The questions are read out loud to you through the headset, one at a time. And then you'll see your answer choices on screen, multiple choice style, and you'll have to select the right answer. The reason it's done, and the last half of the test, parts 4 to 6, are the opposite. You still listen to the conversation, take your notes. The questions that arise then are all written on the computer screen, anywhere from, I think it's 5 to 9 questions per part. And you're tasked now to read the questions and select the right answer. So the reason that you get both structures or formats of listening is because this is what happens in the real world. And that's why the CELPIP test was designed. It's designed to assess your language proficiency in day-to-day style communications. So you can imagine being in the workplace and your manager stops by and asks you a question about that project. You have to hear the manager. You have to understand what he or she has been saying and answer. At other times, you're reading through a questionnaire and you might have to answer that way. So whether you're listening or reading questions, it's still demonstrating your ability to understand what it is you were just listening to overall. So that's why. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So a very popular question. How do manage times during the reading test?
The people who answer the questions most efficiently, and by efficiently, I mean you're not pressed for time. You get all the answers answered before that timer's up. And you've also given some thought to each answer. You're not just furiously clicking on the screen. So by the time we get to that level, these are students or test takers who have understood very clearly which parts of the passages are most important as they relate to the questions at hand. So you'll notice that in the practices that we did today, we started off with a fairly simple activity, beginner style, and moved our way up to intermediate or advanced level. Even just looking at how each idea connects to each other in the passage allows you very quickly, I think, to eliminate wrong answers from consideration. Right? When you see there's a contrast, oh, that's not talking about this answer choice, it can't be right. When you see as a result, indeed, in fact, for example, oh, there's a specific detail that might relate back to the question at hand and so on. So it's a matter of understanding the keywords in the questions and answer choices so you know what you're looking for throughout the passage. But then it's also being able to find those keywords and see how they connect and relate. And when you practice that over and over again, you get so much faster at finding the relevant details to answer correctly. So that's how you manage your time. Yeah. And the other piece to it is honestly just being reasonable with yourself. if you've got, and again, I don't have memorized how many minutes per part, but let's just, for example's sake, say, I think it's in it reading part 1, don't you have 10 questions to answer, or maybe 11 questions in 11 minutes or something like that? So you're going to need time to skim read the passage, and you're going to need time to think about each answer. So out of the gate, you can't give yourself a full minute per question, right? You still need time to read. So again, a very effective test taker who's considered the time is going to allow themselves maybe 40, 45 seconds per answer. And if you don't know the answer by then, guess something and move on, right? That's the best thing you can do. People that maybe don't answer all the questions before time is up have spent far too long on one question that they're stuck on. And I'm saying, if you get that one wrong, that's okay. You've got other questions there that you could still get right. So again, it's not, don't be the perfectionist. Perfectionists often don't do as well. So let the perfection aspect go and just try to get through the questions that you do understand and that you're more confident with. If there's time left, you can always go back and revise an answer or spend a bit more time thinking about it. Some answers will come to you quickly. Maybe it takes you 10 seconds for question 1. Wonderful. You've got an additional 20 or 30 seconds now to spend elsewhere on the test. So these are things, you're not going in there with a watch and timing yourself, but these are just things as you practice at home that you're aware of. And the worst thing you can do is spend all your time thinking about one question. Just let that go and move on, because you do have a time limit. Yeah, I hope that helps anyway.
Thank you. So a couple of them have asked the same question. How can we improve the reading speed? So this answer that Brandi gave is like covers that as well. So definitely go back and watch it again if you weren't able to get the whole thing right now.
Sure.
How to master the skill of elimination of incorrect answers?
I'm not even sure how to answer this one or what it's getting at. It's not a matter of mastering the skill. It's just a matter of like what I just demonstrated in that last example there. It's an inference question that maybe was a bit tricky. We just went through them one by one and thought about each one logically. And we're looking for evidence in the text to back it up. And when we don't see the evidence at all, that the statement is false, we just move on. So that's all it's about. I would say quite often, it depends on your own level too, but quite often with those 4 multiple choice answers, if you do the practice tests we've got 2 free ones on the website, and then we sell 26 additional practice tests in sets and whatnot. When you start familiarizing yourself with the format, I think you'll notice quickly, especially in reading parts 1 and 2, which are the easier parts of this test, I find almost always there's at least one answer that is just so obviously wrong, you don't even really need to think about it. For me anyway, from my perspective. Oftentimes you can get rid of a couple of answers, and if you're still not sure, you're just down to 2 answers left. And by then, if you have to guess, the odds are 50-50, right, that you'll get it right. So yeah, I guess it's just a matter of using logic and reasoning and matching up the vocab as we were doing today to help you discard ones that just don't seem to match the meaning at all.
Okay, so Davi's asked a same question. How to avoid tricky questions or find the trick in the questions, which you just answered. Brandi, I just guess you talked about going back and reading the passage, but if you want to add something else, you can. This question is in 2 parts. So this is the first question. And then the second part is, how can we know what is a great leader or a great athlete? I don't know if I'm making myself clear.
Okay, so if we could go back to that first question so I can see it again, just so I know. Okay, so again, that example that Ashwati shared with us with as a result was incorrect. So it's not a trick at all. And I don't want you to give that really any more mind. It was close, but it wasn't quite accurate in what we were talking about in the time. So that has nothing to do with the trick to reading. That answer was just plain incorrect. So that takes care of that one. As far as tricky questions in the test, there's no such thing as a trick question. When you get to CELPIP level 4, this is advanced level. This is CLB 11 and 12 comfort level. So if you're not already working at an 11 or 12, you're going to have to work extra hard to, again, identify the keywords from the question and answer choices, understand what's the focus. Are we trying to figure out if communication is most important for managers? Are we trying to figure out what the main idea of is in the passage? So when you understand what the question's asking you to do, you then have to realize what type of information you're looking for. For the general meaning questions, every single detail in the paragraph was all about the same topic, how communication is important in life. So that was the approach we used there. There's no trick to it. It's using what we know about the structure of writing. to answer a question like that. For the inference question we did second, we recognize immediately it's inference. Those answer choices are not stated in the passage. So we're going to have to use logic and reasoning to come up with the best idea. All right. And then when we recognize that managers were the ones to, and so on, right? So it's knowing, again, I can't say this enough times. It's knowing what the question is asking you to find, and then knowing where to look for it in the passage. So a lot of this is vocab recognition. So you're matching meaning between questions and answers and ideas in the passage. You are looking for synonyms and paraphrased ideas, as we did a little bit today as well. But a lot of it is, again, just how do these ideas connect? Oh, this is a contrasting idea from here, so therefore that can't be the answer I'm looking for, right? Depending. So there's no trick to it. It all comes down to skill development and understanding how the written words are connected. And that's partly why I had you all help us, and you did a great job today, thank you, of creating your own sentences. Because when you know how to use these words yourselves correctly to produce meaning, it then opens the door to have you recognize the same meaning anyway when you see it applied to another piece of writing, like on the CELPIP test. So hopefully that makes sense. And I may have answered the second point. I don't even remember what the second point was now from him, but
it's the same thing. I think they're just like trying to provide examples to further explain their question. Okay, I'll just quickly go through this. Is it okay if I read one paragraph and then answer, and then another paragraph, and so on in task 3? I tried it sometimes and it works for me. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, and Kit, if it works for you, then do it. Yeah, for sure. If you found something that works, it might be different from the way I've instructed or I've demonstrated, but if it works for you, then please do it. Yeah. And for those of you wondering what on earth we're talking about, reading part 3 is reading for information, where you get 4 paragraphs and they're each attached to a letter. And then you get 9 statements, and you have to match the meaning of those statements to one particular paragraph. And sometimes the statement's not even there, right? So that's what that's all about. So I always teach that. For me, it helps, and it might not work for you, but I always advise that you go through each paragraph and figure out what the main idea is of that paragraph. So then when you look at the statements, you should be able to have a starting point. So like already you're saying, oh, this idea seems to match what's going on in paragraph B. I'll start there. So that's one way to do it. But as Ankit is suggesting, he might read paragraph A and then go through all the statements, and anything that looks like it would belong in paragraph A, you're going through the statements that way. It's definitely a way you could do this. And if it's working and it's successful, then don't fix it. It's already good.
Great. Is it wise to start a sentence with a conjunction, specifically like because or so?
Okay, so if you can remember in the examples I showed you today, do you remember how I had that little icon of the bridge up top, especially in that first group of simple conjunctions? The reason I did that is I was trying to get everybody to memorize the very important rule that those simple conjunctions like and, but, so, or, yet, for, they have to go in the middle of the sentence. The only way to use those correctly is to connect 2 simple ideas together. You cannot and you will not start a sentence with any of those basic conjunctions. There is one exception, which I like 0.1% of the time you can get away with starting a sentence with and, but for practice purposes and accuracy, let's just hold steadfast to the rule that we're never going to start a sentence with a coordinating conjunction, which are the fanboys words, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Those basic joining words. Please, 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 in speaking and writing, only ever use them in the middle of 2 simple sentences. And when you do that, you create a compound sentence. If you begin a sentence with one of those words, you're creating a sentence fragment, which is one of the most serious types of mistakes you could make from a sentence structural point of view. Other types of conjunctions, like that word because, you've got some wiggle room. Sometimes we start a sentence with that word, sometimes we connect. But it's up to you to recognize the order of the ideas, right? So yeah, the upper level ones, there's a little bit of difference in them. But those basic ones, those are the easiest ones to master. So please, if we could all take that away from today's episode, never start a sentence with those basic conjunctions, or you'll be creating a sentence fragment.
Okay, last question. And I'm just coupling a few questions that we got about tips and tricks. How long should we practice reading to get to CLB 11 from CLB 8? I think level 8 to level 11. Any tips? Thank you.
No, I have no idea how long it's going to take you, because it's going to depend on how many times you study, how long your study sessions are, how productive you are when you study. So without knowing you, I can't give you a time estimate, But to jump 3 levels, you're asking a lot of yourself as well. You have to know that. So level 8 is sort of approaching like a low intermediate level. It means you've got a strong foundation. You can answer a question with some details. But at level 8, we tend not to yet have a lot of those complex structures. And our vocab tends to be a lot more general than it is precise and developed. Level 11, on the other hand, is advanced. And in the advanced level, we're seeing all sorts of complex structures with a good variety, using a lot of words like we saw today, like however, in fact, consequently, moreover. So there's a huge jump between 8 and 11. It's definitely achievable, but it's not something you're going to do overnight. It generally takes months for people to improve to that type of level, from a low intermediate to an advanced. But again, I don't know if you're working with a one-to-one tutor. Maybe you're taking a prep course in a college. I don't know. It all depends on how much you're studying, and again, if you've got someone helping you out that can guide you and so on. So I don't know, but keep at it for sure. There's definitely ways to improve. I just don't know how long it would take any individual student.
Okay. All right, Brandi, that's, I think, the end of our questions. I thank you for joining us, and as always, giving us an excellent episode. I will let you go.
Okay, see you next time. Thanks.
Bye. Okay, thank you everybody for joining us and participating. It's really nice to have you participate so actively, because we can then know where you are struggling, what parts need more, which section needs more information, things like that. So we really appreciate you participating. And I have not forgotten our trivia question. So we were talking about whose birthday do Canadians celebrate with a May holiday? And the answer is Victoria Day. Congratulations, Evelyn, for giving us the right answer. We usually have a long weekend during that time. So anyway, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We will see you in 2 weeks. Bye.